Major funding for Carolina Business Review is provided by Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle-market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. And by Sonoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well, two issues have been figuratively burned into our national and local psyche these almost last 2 years: jobs and education. We have heard seemingly every conceivable argument for and against both. But now, with the national elections finally behind us, what do educators and educator functionaries say? Welcome again to the longest running and most widely watched source on Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William. On this Executive Profile special, North Carolina State Superintendent Dr. June Atkinson.
Major funding also by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded October 26, 2012. On this week's program, an executive profile featuring Dr. June Atkinson, State Superintendent, Public Schools of North Carolina. Now, Chris Williams.
Hello, welcome to our program. One small correction. Our guest is the North Carolina State Superintendent of Education, not just the superintendent. That would be, I think, the governor. Dr. Atkinson, welcome again to the program. Good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Chris.
Absolutely. Madam, Your Honor, you know, so much, especially during this election cycle, that has been particularly hard-edged, I think is probably a nice way of saying it, but we've heard so many things about jobs and education, and when it comes to education, the passion and you know, almost mean-spiritedness pervade the public dialogue about education, and we hear so many things about what is wrong with the system. What are you encouraged about? What is right with the system? Let's start there.
Well, I'm encouraged by our increasing graduation rate. When I became superintendent in 2005-2006, our high school graduation rate was 68%. And through the work of teachers and principals and others, our graduation rate in North Carolina went to an all-time historic high of over 80%. That is something that's grand for North Carolina. Also, we have systems in place where we can continue to support the teacher in the classroom. Our teachers are better prepared today than they've ever been prepared before, but our teachers are facing challenges that they've never faced before. For example, in North Carolina, 53% of our students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. So our students have many more challenges than they did in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Let me stop you just right there so I can understand. Has that trend line been increasing on the kids that are getting these free and reduced lunches? And is that a problem in your mind?
Well, it has been increasing, especially during the last couple of years. And we know that when children come from homes of poverty, there can be more problems. They may not have as much food as they need. They may not have access to health care. They may not have access to books and other types of instructional aids that really prepare students to be in school.
Let's start with the kids. You know, so many times, Dr. Atkinson, we look at the symptoms. You know, what is not working in education? Is it the teachers? Is it the way the teachers are incentive? Is it the school boards, as we watch some of that drama play out in whatever community you live in? But when you look at the root causes, many people will say it's about parent involvement. It starts at home, it ends at home, it needs to be, you need to have more parents. You are an educator, you came up through the system. How, what is the trend with parents? Are parents becoming more involved? And I mean through all demographics. Is that something you're worried about? What can be done with parental involvement?
Well, we certainly need to have our parents involved, and the most important place for parental involvement is before students start to school. We know that children from birth to 5 develop vocabularies, and those vocabularies are very essential to student learning. We know in our state with preschool education that for every dollar that has been invested in preschool education, we reap a benefit of anywhere from $15 to $18 when you monetize the impact on social services, etc. Parents must read to their children on a daily basis before they come to school. They must continue to support the children in reading. We know that our children lose 2.5 to 3 months of reading progress every single summer in the early grades, so it's important for parents and other adults to support children in the summers. Parents really are our students' best teachers, or first teachers, and we hear that all the time, but that is really important. Parents have to help children set goals, to build dreams, to help them understand the importance of public education, and that's important for every single child. And we do need more parental involvement in order to do our work as educators.
So how do you break that cycle? You've got a parent, you might have a single parent, you might not have a single parent, you might have grandparents raising some of the kids that are now kindergartners or preschool, or, you know, as you talked about, the kids right out of the womb. So how do you break that cycle? Because maybe those parents didn't have it.
Right.
How do you compel parents to be parents?
Well, it is difficult. I am happy that some communities across North Carolina are doing parenting classes, that they are talking to parents about how important it is to support the child, to read to the child. Many nonprofits are also addressing this issue. Churches are providing Mighty Mondays. Well, for example, in my church, they provide Mighty Mondays, and this is a time when church members pick up students from school and bring them to the church to give them extra help and assistance. I know this is a simple answer, but it's very, very challenging for us, and that is the more educated the parent is, the more likely it is for that child to be able to have the support and help at home. But after having said that, educators really have to make every day in the class count, and we have a responsibility also. And we're also looking at ways to use technology. For example, there are many, many devices now where we can send home with our children to help them with reading if a parent cannot help. And of course, I'm sympathetic to parents. My mother worked the entire time that I was in school. She had little time after she came home to help me. And so education, the school, really had an important impact on my life. So that's why we need to make sure that our public schools are great and we extend learning for kids before and after school.
Yeah, you know, I want to talk about technology, and I want to go back to the beginning and talk a little broader. Before we leave technology, by the way, if you'd like to follow us, you can at Carolina Policy on Twitter, Facebook, Carolina Business Review, and also carolinabusinessreview.com is our website. Let me go back to the beginning of this, Dr. Atkinson. Is the system, you know, when I look at education, when a lot of people outside of the system look at education, or their kids are in the system, it has a lot of similarities of healthcare. It's so big. It's like trying to put a sweater on an octopus, trying to figure out all the different facets, who's right and who's wrong. Is the entire system, not the entire system, but is the DNA, is the corpus of the education system as we have it now, out of date and broken? Do we need to just reboot this computer?
Well, that's a controversy throughout the United States. What is the role of local boards of education? Are they fulfilling the function of being the community's input? In some cases throughout North Carolina, and I'm sure in South Carolina also, local boards are working really, really well, and they are doing that which is necessary. In other places, I see that boards are an impediment. The one thing about education is that it is public, and sometimes that can be positive, and other times if you don't have the right people who are making the decision. It can be devastating for education. But we know one of the things that we're doing in North Carolina is to provide more options and choices for students so they don't get lost in the system. For example, magnet schools, schools within schools, early colleges, charter schools, career technical education centers. We are moving very rapidly in our state to give our students options, especially at the high school level. And so we see schools across North Carolina having smaller learning communities for students, and that's what's really important. It really is important that teachers have the support they need from the local superintendent and from the local Board of Education. And when we give our teachers support, then we have a much greater chance of our students being successful.
A lot of members of the General Assembly, let's talk about the public policy part of this and the funding part. A lot of members of the General Assembly, Republicans in control for the first time since Reconstruction in the old North State, and have either rightly or wrongly gotten the reputation of eviscerating education. President Ross from the UNC system was on here talking about the value of education as not just economic development and workforce development, but just the value of education in the growing cultural richness of North Carolina. So how do you see the current legislature? Do you feel like they're friends of education? Do you think they're just looking at it as a fiscal line item on the state's general operating budget? How do you look at this?
For the most part, I view that the people in the General Assembly believe in public education. I would give them a C if I were grading them. On one hand, they have helped us with giving us dollars to improve reading instruction. And on the other hand, we have approximately $400 less per student today than we had in 2008, 2009. And I also recognize that we've had difficulty economically in North Carolina. One thing that has bothered me about some of the rhetoric about public education is that it is broken. And I don't believe that that is in the best interest of our 1.5 million children in our state to say that education is broken. The fact of the matter is that we're doing better today when you look at multiple measures than we have ever done in our state. For example, Education Week ranked North Carolina at its highest ranking in January of this year that we've ever had. So there's so many ways to measure how we are doing in North Carolina or in South Carolina, but graduation rate is a very critical measure, and snapshots of tests give us a little indication of how our schools are doing, but it's not the end all to be all, or ever how that saying goes. So we have to look at multiple measures to see how our schools are doing. And the person who uses just one measure really needs to expand that to look at the big picture.
How would it, you know, you sit at the top of the pyramid in education, in both administratively and also figuratively and literally. And you run a budget. You have employees, you have a bunch of teachers, I mean, you've got to balance a lot of things. What would you, if you were king for a day, Dr. Atkinson, and you could say, I'm going to do X to education, and knowing that we do have to balance a budget, what would you tell legislators, and what would you also do? What would you like to enact that would break free education and take it in the right direction?
Okay, number one, I would have a balanced calendar schedule.
Does that include summer school?
Well, what that means is that we would spread our days over the entire year rather than having them bunched into 9 to 10 months. Research supports the notion that our students lose progress during the summer, both in reading and mathematics. So we need to have a balanced calendar where we would spread 180 to 185 days where we would go to school, let's say, for 10 weeks and off 3, 10 weeks off 3. That's just one example. We are tied to a calendar that is not in the best interest of our students. The second thing I would do is that I would extend the employment of teachers so that they would have time to work together in a more collaborative way for the benefit of students. Again, we have all the work of the teacher bunched into 10 months. I would also raise teacher salaries. Teachers are the key to classroom instruction. They are the key to our students' learning. I would also continue with what we're doing now to have a technology infrastructure where teachers can be more efficient by using technology. They can be more effective by using technology. The other thing that I would do is to continue on our efforts to give options to students at the high school level, especially where they can take their career interest and be in schools within schools or in centers where they can learn math, science, English language arts, and career information. So there are some of the things that I would do. I would also focus on our principals, the leadership in the building. That's critical. So we have to have an ongoing professional development, and we have to have dollars for professional development.
And let's take some of these point by point. Let's go back to the last part for the principals. Is the principal the most important person in that school when it comes to leadership, when it comes to development of that school, and ultimately trickles down to the kids?
Yeah. Next to the teacher, the principal in the school is the most important adult in a school. The principal sets the tone. The principal is the one who gives support to the teachers. The principal is the one to provide leadership, and we can never underestimate the power of an effective principal in each school in our state.
How would you reset compensation for principals? I mean, let's talk about teachers in a second, but how would you incentivize these principals?
First, I would give much higher salaries to principals who go to schools that are struggling. I would want to make the principal salaries to be comparable for those in other professions who have to have similar educational requirements and experience. Our principals do need to have salaries that would be comparable to what they could earn in the business world.
Would the end of grade testing factor at all in a principal's compensation? Should it?
Well, we need to use multiple measures over multiple times, including student growth, to determine the effectiveness of a principal at a school. We also need to use multiple measures over multiple times, including student growth, to determine teacher effectiveness. And the model that we have developed in North Carolina to determine principal and teacher effectiveness does have as one of its factors student growth.
Excuse me for interrupting you, but there's just so many facets of this. So does that mean that North Carolina, Dr. Atkinson, do we need to have a heavier emphasis on the compensation for those in the teachers in the classroom? Should their compensation be more tied to how that student grows, performs, grows? I'm not quite sure how you.
Well, what we say is, where was the student at the beginning of the year and where is the student at the end of the year? And that would determine growth, and that should be a factor. But we also need to know that a test to measure growth or a test to measure how a student is doing is only one component of what a teacher does in the classroom every day. That teacher is preparing students to be a great citizen. That teacher is doing things for students that really cannot be measured by just one test. So that's why I say that it has to be just one of multiple measures in determining how well a teacher is doing.
Do you find that the right teachers, in your mind, whatever that means, do you find that the right teachers embrace that concept to be incentivized that way?
Yes, I do. Our teachers really see teaching as a collaborative effort, and in most cases, in most cases where I've had conversations with teachers, they want the team to be rewarded for progress. They don't necessarily see that just one teacher out of the group should be rewarded, because for the most part, teaching really is a team sport. It is teamwork. And for the most part, teachers want schools to be rewarded for having high student growth. And I think that if you were to take a poll of all of our teachers in the state, they would say, we want our entire school to be eligible for having growth in our state, in our school.
Who's doing it well? Who out there is incentivizing or is paying the teachers the right way, or at least going in the right direction? What state, what country, what private school? I'm sorry, let me throw this into it too, Dr. Atkinson. You talk about technology. The good nights at SAS were instrumental in starting Carey Academy.
Right.
That is almost all about leaning into technology.
Right.
And it seems like they've had a measure of success there. Are we just not throwing enough technology into the classroom?
Well, we are working on an initiative to have one piece of technology for every student. That's what's so great about the Carey Academy. Number one, they do have a digital device for every single student. They also have experiences for students that are not available to our public schools. For example, students who go there when they want to learn about Europe, go to Europe. Mm-hmm. So we can't have that same experience for every 1.5 million children we have in the state. But we can use technology to bring Paris to the student through technology. And that is a very critical strategy that we have in place. North Carolina has the second largest virtual school in the United States. We have over 50,000 students each year taking courses online. And our goal is to break those courses that we have online into smaller modules where all of our 95,000 teachers ultimately can have access to that technology. When you talk about, is there a state, is there a country that does it well? Finland is a really good example of a country compensating teachers well, treating teachers as professional, providing the necessary support for people who want to become teachers. Finland is a model. Of course, that country is much more homogeneous than North Carolina or the United States, but we can learn lots of lessons from them on how to value teachers, how to respect teachers, and how to compensate teachers well. When you look at the United States, we have been doing lots and lots of research about compensation programs. And the truth of the matter is there is not a single state in the United States that has a model that is sustainable and that has worked over time. Right.
And we spend a lot of time. We've got a couple minutes left. Let's go to this whole idea that plenty of people sat right here where you are sitting and said, you know, not all the kids should go to college. Some kids should go to an apprenticeship program, a technical school, community college. How do you come down on that?
First of all, I believe that all of our students must have options, and therefore we must give them the foundational skills in our schools where they can go to a community college, go to work, or they can go to a four-year college. I am, by my training and preparation, a vocational education teacher. I taught at Myers Park High School here in the Charlotte area, and I am a supporter of making sure that our students can go to community colleges and have that option. All students don't want to go to four-year universities, but sometimes we need to make sure that we have a transition so that if they decide after a technical school that they want to go to a four-year college, they should be able to do that. And we need to give the foundational skills to every student. And when they get to high school, they should have the option of going into an apprenticeship program, having another type of work study, going into engineering, health sciences, business, travel and tourism, and the list goes on.
So how do you pull, Dr. Atkinson, how do you pull the businesses more into the educational process? How does that partnership work?
Well, we have some magnificent partnerships in North Carolina with business people. We use them to review the curriculum of what we're teaching, to give us feedback. We work with the North Carolina Business Committee on Education. We work with the Chamber. We work with them as far as getting jobs for students. And we have a network of over 400 business people in our state who give us advice and work at the local level with different initiatives.
We're going to have to cut you off there. Okay. I wish we had more time, and I know Tricia Willoughby be thrilled that you were talking about that in North Carolina Business Committee. Thank you for being on the program. Didn't know that you were a Mustang, Myers Park Mustangs.
Yes.
That's good, I guess, for a lot of people that go there. But thank you for being on the program, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Thank you for watching our program. Once again, as we push our way into technology here on this program, don't forget you can follow us at Carolina Policy on Twitter and CarolinaBusinessReview.com. Make show suggestions, say whatever you want within reason. Until next week, I'm Chris Wood, and good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by The Duke Endowment, a private foundation in Charlotte enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton, an international accounting, tax, and business advisory organization dedicated to serving middle market companies. Grant Thornton, a passion for the business of accounting. Novant Health, including Presbyterian in Charlotte and Forsyth in Winston-Salem, are affiliate heart hospitals of the Cleveland Clinic, consistently ranked #1 in the nation for heart care. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, proudly serving South Carolinians since 1946. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.